The Croft family once at the top of the global rich list suddenly went bankrupt. Mr. and Mrs. Croft died in a plane crash. The once radiant Croft and Heiress lost both her parents overnight and was saddled with hundreds of millions in debt. When her creditors had her backed into a corner, about to kill herself by burning charcoal in her tiny apartment, I was the one who charged through the thick smoke to carry her out. Chloe leaned against my shoulder and asked in a raspy voice, "Why did you save me?" I stared at her intently. "Because as long as you're alive, there's hope." I had been abandoned by my parents, bullied by my classmates, and insulted by customers. Saving Chloe was like saving the desperate person I once was. I made up my mind and said, "I'm not going to Georgetown Law. I can sell fish to pay for your education." Chloe froze, her eyes instantly welling up with tears. I smiled. "The tuition at Georgetown is too expensive. You're going to Harvard. It's a better investment." And so we came to depend on each other, living in a tiny, dilapidated apartment less than 100 square feet. I worked 3 jobs a day and was utterly exhausted. Chloe's concern for me eased all my weariness. She tutored constantly, just so I could eat a little better. And she would even crouch by my chaotic fish stall and scale fish with her own hands. This continued until Chloe became a household name topping the list of young billionaires. I sat in a corner at her company's IPO launch, watching her in a long gown, poised and eloquent, surrounded by a crowd of fawning elites. In that moment, I smelled myself. I had sprayed on the cologne she'd given me, but it couldn't mask the scent of fish that clung to me. Chloe personally announced she was hiring Julian Vance as her chief legal officer. He was the most handsome guy at Harvard, and his father was a titan in the legal world. Everything I owned from head to toe wasn't worth the change he paid for his tie. We stood shoulder to shoulder, a perfect couple. The press conference felt more like their engagement party. I cried that night. I sat in our apartment and drank an entire case of beer. But it wasn't enough to numb the pain. The Chloe who gave me a soda tab as if it were a ring. The Chloe who handed over every penny of her scholarship money. Chloe who would cry with guilt whenever I got sick. But we were never from the same world. I remembered her promise again. "Ethan, I'll make sure you have a good life." She gave me a comfortable life, freeing me from hunger and cold. But she never spoke of love again. So leaving her was the best option. The next day, I went to see Julian's father. Mr. Vance pushed an agreement in front of me. $100 million, plus a job offer at a Wall Street law firm. "Leave Chloe for my son." His every gesture radiated the quiet authority of a legal powerhouse. When I hesitated to sign, he frowned and sneered. "You sell fish for a living. Do you really think you're good enough for a C or AB Ford?" I lowered my eyes, silent, the hand holding the pen trembling slightly. Mr. Vance pressed, "You're an orphan. Can you support her the way Julian can?" I shook my head slowly, and with a bitter laugh, I signed my name on the agreement. The black ink on the white paper laid out the terms clearly, severing the bond between Chloe and me completely. I walked out of the coffee shop and was about to call a car, when a news alert about Chloe popped up on my phone. Already trending #1. Billion-dollar project secured. Business magnate Chloe Crofton and legal prodigy Julian Vance joined forces, stunning the business world. People online were flooding the comments with their blessings. The Ice Queen, CEO and the rich heir. A beautiful love story. Now that's a perfect match. I gripped my phone tighter as my tears fell onto the words "perfect match." It was time for me to go. My phone suddenly rang. It was Chloe's playful voice on the other end. "Why weren't you picking up? We're having a company celebration tonight. I'd be really happy if you came." I was about to refuse, but Chloe, as if reading my mind, said, "I want you to be there." Her voice had a rare, pleading quality, just like when she was 19 and had just earned her first big paycheck. She wrapped her arms around my waist and said, "I wish you didn't have to work so hard." I quietly murmured my agreement. "So can you come pick me up?" After a long pause, Chloe finally explained, "Sorry, I have to pick up Julian. He was the key to closing this deal after all." I shouldn't have expected anything, but my heart ached uncontrollably. I went home and changed into the nicest clothes I owned, but standing in the middle of the glittering ballroom, I still felt terribly awkward. Julian approached with his arm around Chloe's shoulders, looking dashing and distinguished in a black suit whose cotton fabric were infinitely superior to mine. I turned to flee, but a voice stopped me. "Ethan, I'm so glad you could make it," Julian said with a smirk. "Chloe mentioned you weren't comfortable in these settings. Good thing I insisted, or she wouldn't have invited you." I looked over at Chloe, my hands clenching in humiliation. Julian shook my hand like we were old friends and led me to the buffet. I hear you work at the fish market. I had the chef prepare a few things I'd love for you to try. I stared at him and shook my head. Mortified. I don't know how. Julian handed me a tin of caviar. I'll teach you. After all, you took care of Chloe for me. I've been wanting to thank you. I instinctively glanced at Chloe, but she just gave a slight nod of approval. As I tried to push it away, the caviar spilled all over my clothes. Chloe's brow furrowed. Julian gasped. Oh, I'm so sorry. Why don't I take Ethan to get a change of clothes? I tried to refuse, but I saw Chloe nod. Julian, thank you for taking care of it. With no other choice, I followed Julian toward the elevators. The instant the elevator doors slid shut, Julian let out a cold laugh. He looked down at me condescendingly. Chloe really thought you loved her. Turns out you're just a greedy fishmonger who'd sell her out for cash. I watched the floor number climbing, saying nothing. Julian shot me a suspicious look. You're not having second thoughts about leaving, are you? I looked at him and pressed my lips together. Don't worry. The elevator began to fall, the steel cable shaking violently. I was slammed against the wall as Julian's terrified scream echoed in my ears. My blood poured from my forehead, blurring my vision, and a pain so intense it felt like my organs were being twisted into knots shot through me. Just before I lost consciousness, I thought I heard Chloe's panicked voice. I instinctively reached out a hand. Chloe, save me. But, after a rescuer assessed the situation, his expression was grim. Miss Crofton, our resources are limited. We can only get one of them out at a time. We're running out of time. Who do you want us to save? That familiar voice, nearly breaking with strain, called out name. She said it again. Julian. Save Julian first. Before my vision faded completely, a single bloody tear slid from the corner of my eye. I shouldn't have been sad. Chloe had found someone she wanted to protect more than me. And now I could finally leave for good. When I woke up, a nurse, changing my bandages, spoke quickly. You have a mild concussion. Any later and you wouldn't have made it. Your sister is in the next room with Mr. Vance. Do you need me to get her for you? I froze, my cracked lips barely forming the word sister. The nurse nodded. Miss Croft said you were her brother. She told us to let her know the second you were awake. Chloe looked terrible when she came in. Chloe had seen the notification from the visa center on my phone. Her gaze was chilling. Where are you going? It took me a moment to process before I said hoarsely. It's probably a spam message. Someone like me isn't going abroad. My faint, self-deprecating tone seemed to smooth the worry from her brow. Chloe's eyes fell on my pale face, and she sighed. I'm sorry. I failed to protect you. I replied flatly. It's fine. Mr. Vance is the priority. Chloe lowered her gaze and was silent for a long moment before speaking. Julian has a long career ahead of him. I couldn't ruin his life, so I had to let you take the fall. You're used to hardship, but he's lived a privileged life. I couldn't. I wanted to argue, but a lump formed in my throat, and I clenched my fist so tightly my knuckles turned white. In the end, I just gave the slightest nod. All our time together, through thick and thin, felt like nothing more than my own delusion, completely worthless in her eyes. Julian has a clotting disorder. Chloe began hesitating. He might need a transfusion at any moment. You and he are both Rh negative. Ethan, would you be willing to donate some blood for him? Just in case. The color rained from my face. Chloe took my icy hand in hers. The word no screamed inside my head, and a bitter acrimony felt like a million ants eating away at my heart. The room was so quiet that time itself seemed to have stopped. I suddenly laughed. Of course, sis. Chloe froze, surprised I had agreed so readily, and even more shocked by what I had called her. She frowned, about to explain, when a nurse burst in. Miss Crofton, Mr. Vance is down to his last bag of blood. Chloe shot to her feet. Ethan, please. She helped me up and rushed me to the Flebetail lab. My veins were hard to find. The nurse had to probe with the needle several times before finding the right spot. By the time they had drawn 7 vials, my forearm was a patchwork of blue and purple. Just as the nurse was about to hand me a cotton ball, Chloe took it from her, crouched down, and gently pressed it against the puncture wound. She lowered her head and blew softly on the spot, the same gentle way she used to when I trying to soothe the sting. It felt like someone had squeezed my heart. A sharp, aching pang. She asked, softly. Does it hurt? I'll be gentler. Okay, and my eyes burned, and I desperately wanted to throw my arms around her. Just then, a doctor ran up, out of breath. Miss Crofton, it's an emergency. Mr. Vance was trying to find you and fell out of his bed in his haste. Chloe cried out, but her hand tightened reflexively, and the pain made me suck in a sharp breath. She bolted out the door and ran toward Julian's room. The cotton swab fell to the floor and broke in two, just like our relationship now broken beyond repair. I checked out of the hospital by myself. I stumbled home, and when I pushed open the door to our house, the first thing I saw was Chloe feeding Julian his medicine. Seeing me, Julian immediately came over, a look of apology on his face. Ethan, you're back. It's not what you think. The legal department called with an emergency, and Chloe and I were planning to come get you as soon as we finish. Julian stepped forward and took my hand, his voice full of remorse. Besides, I have your blood in my veins. I haven't even had a chance to properly thank you. He squeezed my hand, his thumb pressing hard on the needle mark on my skin. A sharp pain shot up my arm. I winced and pulled my hand away. I hadn't used any force. Yet Julian staggered backward dramatically. Chloe rushed forward and caught him, steadying him from behind. Her icy gaze landed on me. Ethan, what are you doing now? Julian is still hurt. I looked at Chloe, my eyes filled with exhaustion. She didn't even wait for an explanation before siding with Julian. Julian was hurt. Yes, but I was the one who was more injured. My voice was quiet. I'm sorry. It was my fault. Scolding words died in Chloe's throat. She opened her mouth to speak several times but said nothing. Julian shook his head, feigning generosity. It's nothing. Why don't you join us at the hearing later? I heard you never got to go to Georgetown, he said, his tone sincere, as if he was doing me a favor. Think of this as a chance to live out that dream. I glanced at Chloe and saw her gazing at Julian, her eyes full of admiration and indulgence. I gave a self-mocking smile and agreed. I didn't want to cause any more trouble before I left. The courtroom was solemn, the atmosphere tense. Chloe and Julian sat side by side. His long fingers marked up the legal documents while she tilted her head, listening intently to his analysis. They were so close. They looked less like colleagues and more like lovers sharing secrets. He made a show of being thoughtful. Chloe, should we let Ethan weigh in? Chloe frowned. No, he doesn't understand any of this. He'll only slow you down. Hearing that, Julian put on a show of disappointment, but from an angle she couldn't see. He shot me a look of pure contempt. I sat in the corner, clutching the legal brief so tightly it crumpled in my hand, the sharp edge of the paper cutting my finger. I was an embarrassment, unfit for such a stage. In her eyes, I was just a fishmonger who never even went to college. The days we spent struggling to survive were probably memories she hated most. I sat in the corner of the gallery, watching the approving looks Chloe gave him, watching them smile at each other. Then the opposing counsel found a hole in Julian's argument. Mr. Vance, you claim my client plagiarized Crofton Corp's core architecture, but the aggregation algorithm is an industry standard. How is that plagiarism? Julian was speechless, his face turning red. Well, it's... My eyes flickered, and I shot a look at Chloe. That algorithm was her life's blood. She had developed it 5 years ago, in our damp basement apartment, working it out again and again on scrap paper I'd bought with my earnings. And now someone was trying to destroy all her hard work. I blurted it out almost instinctively. The core issue isn't the architecture. Their product copied Crofton's proprietary way, calculation logic and feedback mechanism exactly. The opposing lawyer was struck silent. Julian whipped his head around to stare at me in disbelief. Mr. Reed, this is a formal hearing. Uninvolved parties are not to speak. Chloe frowned, and when she looked at me, her expression was one of weary resignation. Finally, she spoke. We request a continuance. She took Julian by the hand and walked out of the courtroom. A pain shot through my chest as I quietly followed them. Just around the corner, I heard her voice as she stood on her tiptoes to kiss him. How can a fishmonger from the market possibly compare to a brilliant legal mind like you? Every word was like a shard of glass piercing my chest. Ethan suddenly remembered the moment Chloe finally cracked that algorithm. She had hugged me so tightly. Under the flickering light bulb, she had stood on her toes and given me a gentle peck on the lips. It was my first kiss. Suddenly, a venomous voice came from behind me. Ethan, who the hell do you think you are? In the mirror, I saw Julian's face twisted with rage. A pair of strong hands grabbed my arms. Before I could react, he landed a solid punch. Julian stared at me with a smirk, then suddenly burst out laughing. Who do you think you are, daring to humiliate me like that? I thought you knew your place. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that a pretty boy from the slums would get delusional ideas. I struggled with all my strength, prying his fingers off me one by one. Mr. Vance, I won't go back on my promise. Before I could finish, Julian suddenly slammed his hand, adorned with a large, expensive jade ring, against the bathroom mirror, shattering it. Sharp fragments of glass showered down on me, and blood started to flow from a dozen small cuts. Seeing me covered in blood, Julian smiled cruelly. This is what happens when you piss me off. Then he picked up a shard of glass, made a shallow cut on his own forearm, and threw the bloody piece at me. As he let out a theatrical scream, Chloe burst in and rushed to his side. What happened? Julian put on a brave face. It's nothing. It's my fault. I almost cost the company everything. Ethan has every right to be angry with me. Chloe's cold glare fixed on me. Ethan, the company has nothing to do with you. Stay out of it. I frowned. I didn't do anything. He's framing me. The anger in her eyes hardened. Are you still trying to lie? He's a pampered heir from a wealthy family. Where would he get the strength to smash a mirror? Did you learn these kinds of dirty tricks, living in that rough neighborhood of yours? With that, she helped Julian up, shot me one last cold look, and left. I stood there frozen, my eyes moving from the shallow scratch on Julian's arm to my own bleeding cuts. And then I started to laugh. I remembered scraping my knee raw while delivering food in the rain to make extra money. Back then, it was Chloe's tears that fell on my wound. She had whispered a promise to me. Ethan, I'm going to make it big, and you'll never have to suffer again. Well, Chloe had made it big, and I had suffered more than enough. This woman, who had always been so calm and composed, was now dragging me through the mud for Julian's sake. Time and time again, lying in the hospital bed, I stared blankly at the ceiling. So the girl who once swallowed her pride to shout and sell fish with me at the market would one day look at me with disgust. I buried my face in my pillow too, hide the tears welling in my eyes. The door creaked open. Chloe placed a bouquet of jasmine on my bedside table, and then pulled a small bag of warm, roasted chestnuts from her coat, pressing it into my hand. The steam rising from the bag blurred my vision. She broke the silence first. They're from that place you liked. See if they still taste the same. I didn't reply. Just explained in a hoarse voice. I didn't mean to interrupt at the hearing. I just couldn't stand by and watch all your hard work go down the drain. And I really didn't hurt Julian. If I'm going to leave, I want to leave with my name cleared. Chloe suddenly pulled me into a gentle hug. I know all of it. Then she added, just let Julian have this one. Her words were a death sentence. His family is powerful. Even when he's wrong, no one dares to challenge him. She paused. Ethan, just be reasonable. I froze, biting down on my lip until I tasted blood. How much more reasonable could I possibly be? Would she only be satisfied if I died? I whispered, Chloe, did you bring roasted chestnuts for Julian too? Chloe paused for a second, then slowly shook her head. They're full of additives. Julian wouldn't eat them. The heat from the chestnuts was so intense, it raised a blister on my finger. But I barely noticed. She peeled one and was about to offer it to me when she saw Julian standing in the doorway. Ethan, I came to apologize, he said. It was my poor preparation that caused trouble for the company. He opened a velvet box in his hands. Inside was a pair of dazzling multi-million-dollar diamond earrings. A small token of my apology. He stepped closer. Let me help you put one on. I was about to refuse a grown man wearing an earring when Chloe's firm voice cut in. Don't refuse Julian's kind gesture. The next second, a sharp pain pierced my earlobe as the silver post was forced through the skin, drawing a thin line of blood. Julian gasped. Ethan, I had no idea your ears weren't pierced. I covered my ear, shaking my head calmly. It's fine. Chloe's brow furrowed in concern, and she started to move toward me. But I turned away. Mr. Vance's cut has reopened, I said softly. Her attention instantly shifted. Her eyes, filled with concern, fixed on the blood seeping from the cut on Julian's arm, and she immediately helped him up to get it bandaged. I looked down at the blister on my hand and, emotional as I popped it with my thumbnail. On the day I was discharged, Chloe herself came to take me home. The car just pulled up to the house when Julian called. Chloe, don't forget the reunion later. Bring Ethan along. It'll be good for him to relax. Without a word to me, Chloe immediately turned the car around. Looks like Julian still has Chloe wrapped around his finger. One call and she comes running. I know her, Aide. The couple from college. It's about time they finally got together. Through the course of teasing, someone noticed me. Who's this? Julian slung an arm around my shoulders and introduced me with a smile. This is Ethan. I've told you guys about him. He's Chloe's. He trailed off, a look of awkwardness on his face. After all, Chloe had never publicly acknowledged our relationship. My eyelids fluttered. I'm a distant relative, I said quietly. A relative, one of his friends said, looking me up and down. Looks more like some poor cousin from the sticks looking for a handout. Chloe frowned. Julian quickly intervened. Hey, don't say that. Ethan sells fish at the market. He works harder than any of us. Someone waved a hand in front of their nose as if smelling something bad. I pretended not to notice and found a seat in the corner. Chloe was about to sit next to me when her phone rang. She whispered something to Julian, asking him to keep an eye on me, then excused herself. The moment the door closed, Julian's smile vanished. He glanced at me, then turned to his friends and started talking about the latest cut or collections, completely ignoring me, listening to them casually discuss brands that cost tens of thousands. I gripped the hem of my cheap shirt. Julian suddenly pointed at the logo on my chest. Ethan, is that MIU you're wearing? I looked down confused. You're seeing things, Julian. That's a knockoff. One of his friends laughed. The fishmonger wears fakes. They picked apart my clothes, and their malice felt like a rising tide, slowly suffocating me. Julian stepped in with a laugh, but his eyes were filled with scorn. Come on, guys. Ethan works a tough job. It's understandable he doesn't have a sense of style. I looked down, the calluses on my palms aching as I clenched my fists. In my peripheral vision, I saw Julian's smooth, slender hands. The hands of a man who had never known manual labor. They made me feel like a shabby clown. Just then, Chloe came back to the table. Soon everyone was loudly demanding a game of truth or dare. When the bottle landed on Julian again, he gave a helpless laugh. I'll take a dare. Kiss a girl in this room for 3 minutes. A friend called out, drawing out the words. Through this piece of paper, of course, he added, holding up a sheet of paper. Julian's eyes shifted, and he took Chloe's hand, murmuring, Chloe, help me out. It's just a game. Ethan won't mind. He looked at me. Right. I nodded curtly. Do whatever you want. But Chloe's eyes grew dark, and, as if to spite me, she pulled Julian towards her and kissed him. Their fingers were interlaced as they kissed long and deep. The flimsy sheet of paper fluttered to the floor. But it felt like it had torn a hole straight to my heart. I quietly went up to the rooftop for some air, only to be cornered by Julian's friends, all holding drinks. Ethan, you finally realized you're not wanted here. Stinking of fish. Wearing knockoffs you can't afford. You're not worth Julian's little finger. And you think you have a chance with Chloe. They backed me into a corner. They sneered, forcing a glass to my lips. They held me down, forcing the burning liquid down my throat. My stomach felt like it was being ripped apart. I collapsed onto the floor, and then felt a sharp pain as a hand, holding a small knife, sliced across my back. The ringleader laughed mockingly. You're the fishmonger. Right. The tip of the blade carved the word into my back. The smell of blood filled the air. I was shaking in agony. With trembling fingers, I managed to pull out my phone and dial 911. The sharp blade cut into me again, and a pool of my own blood began to spread on the floor beneath me. Humiliation and pain twisted together inside me, until even my breath came in shuddering gasps. Just before I blacked out, I thought I saw the panic in Chloe's eyes. The lavage was slowly forced down my throat. The mixture of stomach acid and solution churned inside me. My whole body shook. Each flush of my stomach felt like being sliced apart by 1,000 knives. I woke again late in the night. I shifted slightly, and Chloe, who had been dozing by my bedside, immediately woke up. She had faint dark circles under her eyes, and the hand holding mine was trembling. I'm sorry, she said. I never thought they'd go that far. I looked at her red-rimmed eyes and could only picture her flushed lips as she kissed Julian. I slowly closed my eyes, too weak to speak. I just raised a hand and pointed toward the door, telling her to leave. Chloe was silent for a long time, before she pulled out a document. This is a legal release for Julian's friends. I need you to sign it. I stared at her for a few seconds. My this piece of a release. Her eyes were unreadable. You shouldn't have called the police so rashly. They've suffered enough. And besides, they're friends of mine and Julian's. Just let it go. My voice was shaking. So I deserve everything that happened to me. Chloe frowned slightly, as if she had anticipated this reaction. She nodded to her assistant, and bodyguards from outside the door brought in a large safe, which they opened to reveal stacks and stacks of cash. Even if every word on that document costs a fortune, this should be enough to cover it. I bit down hard on my lip, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. When I said nothing, she gestured again, and more cases were brought in. 1, 2, then 3 until they filled the entire room. Chloe's cold voice came from above me, every word grinding my self-respect into dust. A mansion downtown. The deed will be in your name. My eyes stung as I remembered us huddled under a single blanket in that tiny, cramped apartment. She continued, a Porsche 911. Here are the keys. I clenched my fists, remembering riding through the park with her on the back of my bicycle. Any job you want at Crofton Corp, she said. I bit my lip until it bled, remembering how she'd worked 3 jobs a day just to buy me a pair of knee pads. My voice was a raw, broken whisper. I'll sign. Chloe, this is the last time. The very last time I do anything for you. She opened her mouth, but said nothing, as if she couldn't see the grief in my eyes. Her silence was a final punctuation, mark in our 8-year relationship. The Chloe who used to clumsily knit cars for me, who would wait for me in the freezing cold until her ears were bright red, was a world away from the woman standing before me now. I was a burden, a liability, but I was never her partner, never the one she relied on. After that day, Mr. Vance came to see me one time. Ethan, here are your travel documents and visa paperwork. His expression was dark as he tossed a manila envelope onto my bed. Was this whole scene just a way to make trouble for Julian? I shook my head calmly. I've already signed the release. I won't cause any more trouble for your son. I paused. Don't worry. I'll be out of your son's way soon enough. Mr. Vance snorted. At least you know your place. After he left, tears spilled from my eyes without warning, staining the manila envelope. The spots quickly faded, just like the relationship between Chloe and me, as if it had never been worth mentioning at all. So even if I left, Chloe wouldn't care. I had witnessed her at her lowest, her most vulnerable, and those were likely the memories she was most desperate to erase. A news alert popped up on my phone. Crawford Corp was redeveloping the old neighborhood. The basement apartment we had lived in was about to be demolished. The hand at my side tightened into a fist. Trembling, I took off the matching cocaine she had given me and threw it in the trash. Then I went to the front door and erased my fingerprints and facial scan from the security system. For 8 years, I had protected a girl with the purest form of love. But today, I used the last of my strength to drag my suitcase away, determined to finally live for myself. At the auction, priceless treasures were met with gasps of awe from the crowd, but Chloe's mind kept wandering. An antique vase reminded her of the plastic bottle I used to grow flowers. A glass bracelet reminded her of the simple jasmine chain I'd once tied around her wrist. Every item up for bid seemed to conjure a memory of our time together. Chloe, what's wrong? Julian waved a hand in front of her face. I called your name a few times, but you didn't answer. Her focus snapped back, and she forced a smile. It's nothing. See anything you like. I'll buy it for you. At that, Julian forgot her odd behavior and happily agreed. Chloe collected herself, but her pupils contracted when the next item was presented. It was a white jade pendant, the only thing I had with me when I was found as a baby at the orphanage. But that year, after someone had taunted her, calling her the Croft family curse for causing her parents' deaths, she had beaten them so badly that I had to pawn the pendant to pay their medical bills. Chloe didn't hesitate. She signaled an all-in bid, guaranteeing she would win it. Julian looked at her, his face lighting up. Chloe, is that for me? She clutched the cool jade in her hand. No, it's for Ethan. The jade had a tiny, almost invisible crack, which suddenly reminded her of the dead, empty look in my eyes before I left. A sense of panic seized her. She turned to Julian. I'm sorry, I can't do dinner tonight. With that, she stood and walked away, leaving a bewildered Julian in her wake. He frowned, annoyed. No one had ever dared to treat him like that. It was only after confirming with his father that I was really gone that he finally relaxed. As long as Chloe wasn't a complete idiot. She had to know he was the right choice. An unseen force seemed to pull Chloe back to the house. For the first time, the need to see me was overwhelming. But when she pushed open the door, the house was dark and silent. Her heart sank. I hadn't left a light on for her. She flipped the light switch and was momentarily blinded. The brilliant crystal chandelier was a world away from the single dim bulb in our old apartment. She lowered her hand and looked around, but she couldn't see me anywhere. Is Ethan already asleep? She wondered. After we moved into the mansion, I stopped going to the fish market. I would spend my days just waiting for her to come home, looking forward to the simple act of talking with her. But with so many rivals circling her company, the stress got to her. One day, she snapped at me for the first time. I'm exhausted. Can you just leave me alone for a minute? We both froze after she said it. She was the one in the wrong. But I was the one who ended up apologizing. I was always the one making excuses for her. A flicker of guilt crossed Chloe's eyes. She suddenly had the urge to hold me. She gently pushed open my bedroom door. Everything looked normal, except I wasn't there. Her heart seized, and panic began to set in. She turned and scanned the room again. It wasn't just me that was missing. My clothes, my toiletries. Nearly everything I owned had vanished. The white sheets were perfectly smooth, without a single wrinkle, as if I had never existed at all, as if I were just a figment of her imagination. The realization hit her. Her breath caught in her throat, and the color rained from her face as she stood by the bed. Then she saw it. The keychain in the trash. The matching keychain she'd bought for us. It had cost less than $1. But I loved it. I took it everywhere. And now it lay there discarded like a piece of trash. Ethan's gone. This has to be a joke. We spent 8 years together through everything. We were closer than lovers. How could he just leave without a word? Chloe tried to reassure herself. But, after turning the entire mansion upside down, she found no evidence that this was just some cruel joke. She sat on the sofa in a daze until her phone rang. Seeing it was Mr. Vance, Chloe frowned. If he was calling to complain on Julian's behalf, she wasn't in the mood. Chloe, I need you to come to my office. Mr. Vance paused. Then his voice grew serious. I have a lead on what really happened to your parents. Inside her Maybach, Chloe floored the accelerator, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. Her entire reason for getting close to Julian had been to get his father to help her uncover the truth about her parents' deaths. She had seen all the pain I'd endured, but she hadn't wanted to drag me into her dangerous world. The conspiracy was a treacherous undercurrent, and she wanted to wait until it was all over so I could live a peaceful, worry-free life. Vance Associates Law. Chloe, your parents' plane crash wasn't an accident, Mr. Vance said, handing her a folder. Someone remotely hacked the flight control system. Chloe stared at the papers, her eyes turning red. She had been right. It was all premeditated. Otherwise, how could her family's company have been torn apart and devoured so quickly after the funeral? I'll keep looking into the matter for you. Mr. Vance pushed his glasses up his nose, remembering his son's complaints on the phone. And you promised me you would treat Julie unwell. Have you kept that promise? His voice hardened. I hear you abandoned him at the auction for that Ethan Reed. Is that fishmonger so important that you'd abandon your parents' memory for him? When the Crofton family collapsed, he had assumed Chloe would be crushed. He never expected her to have the resilience to climb back to the top of the business world so quickly. A woman like that was just barely a suitable match for his son. Besides, he knew exactly what had happened to her parents. Since Chloe needed him, it was only natural for him to leverage the situation for maximum gain. The veiled threat in his voice made Chloe's hands tighten into fists. If he hadn't been the only lawyer willing to touch her family's case all those years ago, she wouldn't have put up with this for so long. Seeing Chloe's silent, downcast eyes, Mr. Vance sneered inwardly. It seemed he was right. Her feelings for Ethan Reed ran deep. But what did that matter? His power was more than enough to sweep away any obstacle for his son. If anyone was to blame, it was Ethan Reed himself, for getting in Julian's way and for not being born into the right family. Mr. Vance toyed with a gold fountain pen. Ethan Reed left. He said casually. Yesterday. The words hit Chloe, but her composure instantly crumbled. Her voice trembled. No, that's not possible. How would you know? Was it you? Did you drive him away? Seeing her panic state, Mr. Vance snorted. He wanted to go. I just helped him on his way. Her knuckles turned white, as she gripped the edge of the desk, her eyes bloodshot. Impossible. He wouldn't. Mr. Vance was taken aback by the chilling look in her eyes. He frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. I gave him money and a new life. Since he took it, it's obvious how much Chloe really meant to him. Was a man that easily bought off really worth her deluding herself over? With that thought, he cleared his throat and said so aloud. Chloe's expression froze, as if she'd been turned to stone. Her temples began to throb, and a ringing filled her ears. She slammed her fist against the wall, not even noticing when her knuckles started to bleed, and hissed through clenched teeth. You're lying. You forced him out. Mr. Vance's brow furrowed. He had no desire to explain himself further. He clapped his hands, and his men brought in several large cases. He asked me to return these to you when I saw him at the hospital. Now do you believe me? Her eyes fell on the familiar safes, all the things she had given me as compensation. I hadn't taken a single one. The color drained completely from her face. Then she heard Mr. Vance continue being in love with a fishmonger must be a stain on your reputation. Stay with Julian, and I can overlook it. Chloe's voice was raspy. Ethan is my family. That won't interfere with my relationship with Julian. Mr. Vance scoffed. Family. Anyone with eyes can see how you feel about him. I heard you're planning to demolish the neighborhood where you used to live. Aren't you just trying to erase the memory of that time? To forget the powerless girl who was at everyone's mercy? The mention of that apartment was like a psychic blow. Chloe's pupils shrank. She didn't remember running out of the law firm, only driving as fast as she could to get there. But as she arrived, the roar of a bulldozer filled the air, and the basement apartment we had shared was reduced to rubble in an instant. Staring at the rubble, Chloe felt her own world collapse. As she stood there in a stupor, someone tapped her on the shoulder. She turned slowly. It was her old landlord. Chloe, long time no see, the landlord said warmly. Ethan came by yesterday with his suitcase. I thought you two were finally going on your honeymoon. The landlord added wistfully. You two finally made it. He stuck by you through all those hard years. You better treat him right. The landlord went on, recounting those difficult years. Chloe stared blankly at the ground, her eyes vacant, until a single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek, snapping her back to reality. She managed a weak smile and said her goodbyes. Back in her car, her hands shaking. She called me 100 times and sent 1,000 messages. Every call went to voicemail. Every message was left undelivered. I had blocked her. Through the car window, amidst the dusty rubble, she imagined she could see me young and smiling, walking towards her, boasting about a good day's sales. Chloe, I got a few big customers today. Weren't you talking about wanting to study abroad? She slowly curled her fingers into a fist, whispering my name again and again. But no one answered. She slammed her fist on the steering wheel, and the blare of the horn cruelly yanked her back to the present. Chloe could no longer lie to herself. I had really left her. Empty wine bottles lay scattered on the carpet. Outside, the incessant rain seemed to magnify her despair. No one would have guessed that this famously cold and composed business magnate would allow herself to collapse on the sofa, disheveled and broken. The slight puffiness of her eyes the only evidence of her night of drinking. It was the first time she had ever missed a board meeting. Ever since she started her company, she had worked day and night, driven by a single purpose: revenge. Now with me gone, the thread that had held her together had finally snapped. Without me by her side, did any of it even matter? She felt lost and confused. She pressed her right hand hard against her chest, so hard her fingertips turned white. Ever since I came to live with her, the question Chloe heard most often was, who is he? To the nurses, I was her brother. To her classmates, a distant cousin. To her, I was the one who had saved her life. I had so many titles, but lover was never one of them. Chloe, do you love me? I had asked her on her birthday, a little drunk, my head buried in her neck. She had opened her mouth, but no words came out. Out of fear, out of a pathetic sense of pride, she had lied to herself. Convinced it was gratitude, not love, her lips parted, and she whispered the words that were 8 years too late. I'd love you so much. But now that she finally understood her own heart, I was no longer there to hear it. The room was so quiet that her single chokes echoed clearly. When Julian found her, she was swirling a glass of red wine, trying to drown her sorrows in alcohol. Chloe, why weren't you at the office today? He took the glass from her hand, his tone chiding, but his eyes filled with genuine concern. He had searched the entire house for her, but never thought to look in my room. Julian truly couldn't understand it. In terms of family, I wasn't fit to shine his shoes. In terms of education, I was a dropout who'd never even finished college. Other than a handsome face, what did I have that could possibly compare to him? Why was Chloe so completely captivated by me? Even after all his efforts to slander my name, a part of her heart still belonged to me. Chloe stared at her empty hand and frowned. She was about to speak when a sharp, cramping pain shot through her stomach, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Julian gently gathered her into his arms. "Don't you see it yet, Chloe?" he said softly. "Ethan took the money and ran. He never cared about you. I won't let you destroy yourself for him." As his warm tears fell on the back of her cool hand, the pain of my abandonment washed over her. Almost instinctively, she collapsed into his arms. The sudden intimacy of the moment surprised him. "Chloe, what does this mean?" Chloe stared for a moment at her alcohol-fueled haze. Julian's face seemed to blur, and for a second, she saw mine instead. She spoke slowly, deliberately. "Will you marry me?" The moment the words were out, Chloe regretted them. She knew it was more out of spite than anything else. She just refused to believe that she couldn't live without me. If I could leave without a second thought, then she could move on just as easily. She was about to tell him she was drunk and didn't mean it. But he nodded eagerly, as if afraid she'd change her mind. "I do, of course. I'll marry you." Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Wasn't this for the best? She and Julian were a perfect match on paper. His family could help her uncover the truth about her parents, and they could support her company. Marriage was nothing more than a transaction, a tool for mutual benefit. That was what she had been taught since she was a child. A marriage to Julian would be one of mutual respect, calm and uneventful. But if she married me, even a difficult marriage would be filled with a sense of hope. Chloe was only just now realizing that in the 8 years since her fall from grace, I had become an irreplaceable part of her life. The first thing Julian did when he got home was share the good news with his father. Mr. Vance raised an eyebrow and nodded in satisfaction. "So, she finally came to her senses." He looked at his son's overjoyed face and frowned. "The wedding can wait. But we need to schedule the engagement party immediately." It was the perfect opportunity to leverage the Crofton name to expand their network, and it would secure his son's position. And so, he quickly set a date for the engagement. Everything was moving so fast that Chloe still felt like she was in a dream. As she and Julian looked at wedding dresses, looking at the tailored suits in the display window, she smiled to herself. "Imagining me in one of them, if I were to wear that suit at our wedding," she thought, "I would be the most handsome groom she had ever seen." The swoosh of the dressing room curtain being pulled back snapped her out of her daydream. Julian stood before her in a suit, doing a slow turn. "Chloe, how do I look?" "Handsome." "Right." She suddenly went quiet, mistaking her silence for awe. Julian grew bold and pulled her in for a kiss. But she pushed him away, her voice trembling slightly. "That one's fine. I'll pay." Julian caught the flicker of sadness in her eyes, and was about to ask what was wrong, but she pulled him into a quick, tight hug. "Come on. I'll take you home." After signing the check, Chloe walked out of the shop without a backward glance, as if she were fleeing from something. She didn't say a word the entire drive. Julian, unsure of what he had done wrong, tried to fill the silence with small talk. When the car stopped in front of the Vance estate, his incessant chattering was still ringing in her ears. Chloe frowned, then suddenly pulled him in by the neck and kissed him. The world fell silent. After the kiss, Julian got out of the car with a smug smile. Chloe was already halfway home when she noticed he had left his phone in the car. She rubbed her weary temples and with a sigh, turned the car around and headed back. On Mr. Vance's orders, the household staff had long been treating Chloe as the future lady of the house, so no one stopped her as she walked in. The butler graciously led her to the study. "Miss Crofton, Mr. Vance and Julian are inside." Chloe nodded, planning to wait outside. But then she heard arguing from within the room. "Dad, what are you talking about? Chloe and I are in love." Mr. Vance snorted. "She's still in love with that fishmonger. What do you think will happen if she finds out what you did to Ethan Reed? Do you think she'll just forgive you? You had your friends force feed him alcohol. Did you really think you could get away with that without a trace? And all those rumors about him," Mr. Vance continued, his voice filled with disappointment, "weren't they all started by those degenerate friends of yours?" Julian scoffed. "So what? A social climber like him deserved it. My only regret is that I didn't smash his pretty face with that piece of glass. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. Mr. Vance said, "Look, Ethan Reed is no longer a threat to you. Even if you had killed him, I could have made it go away." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "What's important is that you don't actually have to be genuine with Chloe. The purpose of this marriage is to slowly integrate our family's influence into her company." Julian looked confused. "But shouldn't a husband and wife be open with each other? What's hers will be mine. Why all the secrecy?" Mr. Vance's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you remember the investigation she hired me for? Her parents died because the Walker family sabotaged their private jet." The words struck Chloe like a bolt of lightning. Julian's eyes widened. "You knew the truth this whole time. Then why didn't you tell?" "Because I also had a hand in the Croft family's downfall," his father said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "The only reason I was brave enough to take their case was because the Walkers had my back." Julian covered his mouth in shock, struggling to maintain his composure. "Then why did you approve of me and Chloe?" Mr. Vance shot him a look. Who could have predicted that Chloe Crofton would be able to make such a comeback? And with the Walker family's influence waning over the years, I can't afford to bet on only one horse. Since she needs something from me, I'll just lead her along. You need to have a child with her as soon as possible," Mr. Vance instructed. "The Croft family legacy is vast. Do you really think our family won't get a piece of it?" After a long silence, Julian whispered. Okay, that single whispered word was the final straw. The truth she had searched for so desperately had become a cruel joke. She reached out beside her, an old habit from when she was at her most helpless and would reach for my hand. But this time, her hand found only empty air. The sound of a vase shattering was followed by Mr. Vance's sharp voice. "Who's there?" Chloe closed her eyes, turned, and walked back downstairs. She gave the phone to the butler, told him to say she had never been inside, and left. In the darkened mansion, Chloe leaned against a window. She was still reeling from what she had overheard. The Walker and Vance families had conspired to ruin her family, and she had gone to one of the perpetrators for help, almost marrying his son. Her Ethan had never done anything wrong. It was Julian who had systematically destroyed him, piling lie upon lie until he had nowhere left to turn. A coldness spread through her fingers, and her eyes filled with tears. I had loved her, that she had made me compromise again and again until I finally left. The Vanessa S. had destroyed her, yet she had saved all her favoritism and protection. For Julian, Chloe sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she could no longer deny her own heart. Love her husband. It didn't matter. I was the only one she had ever wanted to marry. As for the scumbag who had destroyed her family 8 years ago, she would deal with them. And then, she would be with me free from all burdens. Chloe composed herself, then dialed Mr. Vance's number. Her voice was as calm as ever. "Mr. Vance, I'd like to move the engagement party to an earlier date." The Croft-Vance engagement party was a spectacle of breathtaking extravagance. A crystal champagne hour sparkled under the lights. The red carpet was the color of pigeon's blood, and crystal vases overflowed with blooming jasmine. The fairy tale engagement party captured the attention of the entire city's high society, all focused on the union of these two powerful families. Everyone assumed Chloe was madly in love with Julian. No one knew that every detail of the party she had planned herself was a reflection of a dream I once had. Chloe stood on the rooftop terrace, watching the guests below, her face devoid of any bridal joy. She would make it up to me. She would give me a wedding that was even grander, even more heartfelt. But first, she had to make the people who had hurt us pay a terrible price. "Miss Crofton, we found the black box from your parents' plane," her assistant said, handing her a recording device. "And here's the other evidence you requested." The recording was choppy, perhaps due to turbulence, but through the static, Chloe could hear the sheer panic in her parents' voices. "We've lost control of the plane. It's the Walkers. Damn it. All systems are failing. What will happen to Chloe? She's only just become an adult. How can she?" The recording cut off abruptly with the sound of the impact, leaving only a chilling silence and the echo of her parents' last words. "Chloe, we love you. You have to live a good life." The recorder slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Chloe swayed on her feet like a hollowed-out shell of a person. The Walkers and the Vanessa S. They had destroyed the life she was supposed to have. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Julian, dressed in a white suit, made his entrance. beside his father to a chorus of admiration. Is that him? The top lawyer in the city. A guest whispered. He's even more handsome in person. He and Miss Croft make a perfect couple. I'm so jealous. Someone else agreed. And he's her chief legal officer. A true power couple. She's a lucky woman. The slight smirk on Julian's face and the smug set of his shoulders betrayed his inner delight. Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed with satisfaction. He cleared his throat, feigning indifference. It seemed his gamble had paid off, using the Crofton family as a stepping stone. The Vanessa were poised to climb even higher in the city's political and business circles. A collective gasp went through the crowd as all eyes turned to a tall, elegant figure. Look, it's Miss Crofton. Chloe radiated an aura of cold, noble grace. The 8 years of hardship hadn't broken her spirit. Instead, they had forged in her the decisive ruthlessness of a true leader. Julian stepped forward to take her hand. Chloe, I've been waiting for you. But Chloe crossed her arms over her chest and took a small step back, avoiding his touch. Julian's smile froze, his hand left hanging awkwardly in the air. Her cool gaze swept over the crowd. Thank you all for coming to this engagement party. I'm afraid, however, that it will not be proceeding. Julian whipped his head around to stare at her. Her lips parted, her eyes cold as ice. Because the Vance and Walker families are the ones who murdered my parents. The room fell so silent you could have heard a pin drop. Julian stood frozen, the color draining from his face. Chloe, what are you saying? She gave a cold smile and pressed play. The large screen behind her went black, and the crackling audio from the black box filled the room. Her parents' terrified voices clear for everyone to hear. The truth buried for 8 years was finally out, and the room erupted in shocked murmurs. Someone whispered, I heard the Walkers and the Crawfords were cousins. You really can't trust anyone to do something so despicable to your own family. Julian was panicking, but his father remained unirvingly calm. You think you can convict us with one unsubstantiated recording? Who's to say you didn't fake it? Chloe laughed coldly. Don't worry. I'm not finished. The screen then played a recording of the conversation between Julian and his father in the study, followed by my official medical report detailing my injuries. A scrolling list of all the illicit borderline legal dealings between the Vance and Walker families appeared on the screen. And finally, security footage of Julian deliberately smashing the mirror and attacking me. The room exploded into chaos. The romantic atmosphere was shattered. Julian's eyes widened in terror. He looked around for an escape route, only to find himself surrounded by security guards. The master of ceremonies handed Chloe a microphone, and she proceeded to detail exactly how Mr. Vance had used legal loopholes to systematically dismantle and absorb her family's assets. The engagement party was the event of the season, and it was being live-streamed. She walked slowly toward the cameras, her face a mask of pain. The only man I will ever call my husband, she said, her voice clear and strong, is Ethan Marie. Mr. Vance's face turned a shade of purple. He covered his face with his sleeve, trying to shield himself from the flashing cameras. Get out, all of you. Stop taking pictures. Julian, still delusional, tried to plead with her, but she shoved him away. His face was a mask of disbelief. Chloe, you promised you would never let me get hurt. Your parents are dead. Was it really necessary to drag all of us down with you, just for some nobody like Ethan? Hearing his shameless words, Chloe's hands clenched into fists. How dare you? She lunged at him, her hands closing around his throat. It was you and your father who destroyed my life, who tore me and Ethan apart. If it weren't for Ethan, I would have died in that cold, miserable apartment 8 years ago. Purple bruises were already forming on his neck. Just before he passed out, she released her grip in disgust, letting him slump to the floor. Killing a man like him would only dirty her hands. Seeing the mountain of evidence against him, Mr. Vance dropped to his knees, begging and crying. Chloe, my dear, I was temporarily blinded by greed. The Walkers forced me into it. I had no choice. Hearing him throw them under the bus, the patriarch of the Walker family slapped him across the face, and the two men began to scuffle. You old fool. You were the one who was blinded by greed. I'll kill you. Chloe watched the farcical scene unfold, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. 8 years ago, they had taken her parents and her family from her. 8 years later, they had taken me from her too. Chloe Crofton. You are an absolute fool. Police officers swarmed into the hall and began handcuffing them. Miss Crofton has provided us with a complete set of evidence. Please come with us. Julian, still dazed from the pain, was so terrified by the police that he lost control of his bladder. With 2 of his teeth knocked out, he scrambled on his knees toward Chloe, sobbing and begging, "Chloe, please let me go. I won't ever get between you and Ethan again. Please, forgive me. I'm begging you. I don't want to go to prison." She narrowed her eyes at him. "You want a lighter sentence? Ethan already forgave your friends. What right do I have to forgive you on his behalf now? You and your father can rot in prison together. You can spend the rest of your lives repenting to my parents." And to Ethan, Julian collapsed into a heap on the floor, all the fight gone out of him. But as the police were leading him away, he suddenly began to laugh hysterically. "Chloe Crofton, the person Ethan should hate most is you. I hope you spend the rest of your life, and every life after, begging for forgiveness you will never receive." The farce was over. The guests had all gone. Chloe stood alone in the empty ballroom, her eyes filled with an infinite weariness. An endless tide of regret kept her from sleeping. She covered her face with her hands and whispered again and again, "I would rather have you hate me than this nothingness." She wanted to atone for her sins, but she didn't even have the chance. My reunion with Chloe was fittingly dramatic. I spent 3 years working my way up at a Wall Street law firm. Shortly after I made senior associate, my boss handed me a new case file. "Ethan, given your familiarity with us corporate law, I want you to take this case. It's our first major international merger. If you can land this, a partnership and a hefty raise are practically guaranteed." I took the thick file, but I felt none of the usual excitement of a new challenge, only a strange sense of hesitation. I was still relatively junior, and beneath my crisp suit, my heart pounded with anxiety. I knew it was a fantastic opportunity, but for some reason, I had an instinctive aversion to the case. When I first arrived in New York, I knew no one. I studied for and passed the bar on my own, started by making coffee at a small firm, and worked my way up to handling my own cases. I had endured more than just the changing of seasons. I had pushed through countless sleepless nights of studying. It wasn't until I won my first case that I finally started to regain the self-confidence I had lost so long ago. I realized with a painful clarity how foolish I had been to tear up my Georgetown acceptance letter for Chloe. Since then, I've treated every opportunity as if it were life or death. Yet today, I had almost rejected this one. Shaking off the
To
feeling,
seize this
I decided to
opportunity.
see what was
He
causing
must
my
have seen the apprehension
and
in my
untied the string
eyes
on the envelope.
because he patted
When
my
the name
shoulder
Crofton Corp
reassuringly.
jumped out at me from the
"Don't worry.
page,
I
my
know
heart
Miss
gave a
Crawford has a
painful lurch.
reputation for
Even though a
being
part of me had
ruthless,
been
but I've
expecting
also
it.
heard
Our
she's
client
never
is Crofton
stopped looking
Corp.
for her
My
first
boss
love.
looked up at
A
me and
woman
nodded.
that devoted
"That's
can't
right.
be all
The one
that
and only
difficult to
legendary
work with."
Crofton
Hearing
Corporation.
Chloe's name
Which is
again
all the more
felt
reason for you
surreal,
to seize
like
this
a voice
opportunity.
from another
He
life.
must have
The
seen the
news about
apprehension
her
in my
disastrous
eyes,
engagement
because he
party
patted my
had made
shoulder
headlines
reassuringly.
even in New
"Don't
York.
worry.
When I heard
I
her
know Miss
declare
Crofton
that
has
I
a
was the only
reputation for
man
being
she would ever
ruthless,
marry,
but I've
I
also
couldn't
heard she's
deny the
never
flicker of
stopped
emotion
looking
I
for her
felt.
first love.
But in this
A
foreign
woman that
country,
devoted
I
can't
had
be
been
all that
alone.
difficult to work
Alone
with.
when I was sick,
Hearing Chloe's name
alone
again
for
felt
every
surreal,
meal,
like a
alone
voice
when the
from another
stomach cramps
life.
got so
The
bad
news
I could
about
barely
her
move. I
disastrous
understood
engagement
then that
party
Chloe
had
was
made
destined
headlines
to be
even in
nothing
New
more
York.
than a
When
youthful
I heard her
regret.
declare that
I lowered my head,
the only
about
man
to
she would
speak,
ever marry,
but then I
I
stopped
couldn't deny the
myself.
flicker
"All
of
right,"
emotion I
I
felt.
said
But in
instead.
this
"I'll take
foreign
the
country,
case."
I
This
had been
was
alone.
business. There
Alone
was
when I
no
was
need
sick.
to bring
Alone
personal
for every
feelings
meal.
into it.
Alone when the
Besides, I
stomach
owed
cramps
Chloe
got so
nothing.
bad I could
I had
barely
no
move.
reason to be
I understood then
intimidated
that
by
Chloe
her.
was
On
destined
the
to
flight back,
be
I
nothing
didn't
more than a
sleep a
youthful
wink.
regret.
I
I
watched the
lowered my
sky
head,
outside my
about
window
to
shift
speak,
from starry
but
black to the
then I
pale
stopped
gray of
myself.
dawn,
"All
and for the
right,"
9th
I
time,
said
I
instead.
opened the
"I'll
case
take the
file and
case."
tried to
This was
focus.
business.
In the
There was
conference
no
room,
need to
Chloe
bring
was
personal
already
feelings
waiting.
into it.
Insomnia had
Besides,
become her
I owed
constant
Chloe
companion
nothing.
since I'd
I had
left,
no
but
reason to be
today she had
intimidated by
risen even
her.
earlier
On the
than
flight
usual.
back,
The
I
weariness
didn't
in her
sleep a
deep-set
wink.
eyes
I
was
watched
the
the
clear
sky
result
outside
of
my window
countless
shift,
nights spent
from
numbing
starry black to
herself
the
with
pale
work.
gray of
But the
dawn.
moment I
And
stepped
for the
into the
9th time,
room, her
I opened
gaze
the case
faltered.
file and tried
She
to
even rubbed
focus.
her
In the
eyes,
conference
as if she
room,
thought she were
Chloe was already
hallucinating.
waiting.
Not until I
Insomnia had
offered a
become her
practiced,
constant companion
professional
since I left.
smile and
But
extended
today
my
she had
hand.
risen even
"Miss
earlier than
Crawford,
usual.
a pleasure
The
to meet
weariness in
you."
her
She
deep-set
stared
eyes
for a
was the
few
clear
seconds
result.
before taking my hand. "Ethan, you?" I
Countless
pulled my
nights spent
hand
numbing
back
herself with
firmly,
work.
not
But the
meeting her
moment I stepped
gaze.
into the room,
"Let's get right
her
to
gaze
business,
faltered.
shall we?
She even
I don't
rubbed
want to
her
waste
eyes,
your time."
as if she
Case
thought she were
analysis,
hallucinating.
antitrust
Not
reviews,
until I
closing
offered a practiced,
conditions. I
professional
spoke with an
smile and
easy
extended my
confidence,
hand.
rattling
"Miss
off the
Crofton,
professional
a pleasure to meet
terminology.
you." She
Watching the
stared for a few
confident,
seconds before
polished
taking
man
my
I had
hand.
become,
"Ethan,
Chloe felt
you."
a
I
bitter
pulled my
pang
hand
in her
back
chest.
firmly,
Her
not
eyes
meeting her
began to
gaze.
burn, and
"Let's
she
get right
lowered
to
her head,
business,
afraid
shall
I
we?
would see the
I don't
love
want to
and
waste your
regret
time."
she couldn't
Case
hide. In the
analysis,
3 years since I'd
antitrust
been gone,
reviews,
Chloe had
Closing
imagined
conditions.
our
I
reunion
spoke with
tens
an
of
easy
thousands of
confidence,
times. She
rattling
longed
off
to
the
throw her
professional
arms around
terminology,
me and
watching
demand
the
to know
confident,
why I had left
polished
without
man
a
I had
word.
become.
But now that
Chloe
I was
felt a
actually
bitter pang in
here,
her
she
chest.
couldn't even bring
Her eyes
herself to
began
look
to
at me,
burn,
because
as
she
she
knew
lowered
she
her
had
head,
no right.
afraid
I
I
had
would see the
stood by
love
her
and
side
regret
for
she
8
couldn't
years,
hide.
with
In the
no
3
title,
years since
no
I'd been gone,
recognition, from the
Chloe had
depths of her
imagined our
poverty
reunion
to the
tens of
pinnacle of
thousands
her
of times.
success.
She
And what
longed
had
to
she
throw her
done?
arms
She had
around me and
flirted with
demand to
Julian,
know why I
stood
had left
by
without a
and let him
word.
humiliate
But
me
now
time
that
and
I was
time
actually
again. She
here,
hated
she
herself
couldn't
for
even bring
wasting
herself
8
to look at
years of
me,
my life,
because she
but she
knew she
couldn't
had
let
no
me
right.
go,
I
because
had
I had
stood by her
become an
side for 8
inextricable part
years,
of her.
with no
Her
title,
assistant's
no
quiet voice
recognition,
broke the
from the
silence.
depths of her
Ms.
poverty to the
Crawford,
pinnacle of
Mr.
her
Reed has
success.
concluded
And what
his
had she done?
presentation. Do you
She had
have
flirted
anything
with
to add?
Julian,
I
stood
glanced
by
over
and
at
let him
her, and my
humiliate me
eyes
time and
met
time
her
again.
intense
She
gaze.
hated
I
herself
held
for
her
wasting 8
gaze, my
years of my
tone
life,
strictly
but she
professional.
couldn't let me
If you're not
go, because
satisfied,
I had
Ms.
become an
Crawford,
inextricable
we
part of
have
her.
alternative
Her assistant's
proposals.
quiet
The
voice broke
formal
the
address
silence.
sent a sharp
Miss
pain
Crofton,
through Chloe's
Mr.
chest.
Reed has
After a
concluded his
long
presentation.
silence, just
Do
when
you
I was
have
sure the
anything
deal
to
was
add?
dead, she
I
shook her
glanced over at
head.
her,
I have no
and my eyes
objections.
met her
Whatever
intense
Mr. Reed
gaze. I
requires,
held her gaze,
Crawford Corp
my
will
tone
provide
strictly
its full
professional. If you're not
cooperation. Her
satisfied,
team let out
Miss
a
Crofton,
collective sigh of
we have
relief and
alternative
began to
proposals.
praise my
The formal
professionalism.
address sent a
After
sharp
all,
pain
Miss
through
Crawford
Chloe's
had been
chest.
notoriously
After a long
volatile these
silence,
past few
just
years,
when I was sure
and
the
there
deal
weren't
was
many
dead,
people who
she
escaped
shook
a
her
meeting
head.
with her
I have
unscathed.
no
The
objections.
praise from the
Whatever
others
Mr.
brought a
Reed
small,
requires.
pleased
Crofton
smile
Corp
to
will
my
provide its
face.
full
I had
cooperation.
expected
Her
Chloe to
team
make
let out a
things
collective
difficult,
sigh of
but the
relief
meeting had gone
and began to
smoothly.
praise my
I hadn't let my
professionalism.
boss down.
After all,
I gathered
Miss
my
Crofton
papers
had been
and was being
notoriously
escorted out when a
volatile these
security
past few
guard at the
years,
main
and there
entrance
weren't many
stopped
people
me.
who
Mr.
escaped
Reed,
a meeting
please
with her
wait.
unscathed.
Confused,
The praise
I
from the others
frowned and
brought
was
a
about to ask
small,
why
pleased
when a
smile
voice
to my
came from
face.
behind me.
I had expected
Ethan,
Chloe
don't
to make
go.
things
The
difficult,
familiar
but
voice
the
made me
meeting had gone
freeze.
smoothly.
I turned
I
around
hadn't let my
slowly.
boss down.
Chloe was
I
standing
gathered my
behind
papers
me,
and was being
her eyes following
escorted
my
out when a
every
security
move,
guard
a
at
mixture
the
of
main
caution
entrance
and the
stopped
sheer
me.
joy of
Mr. Reed,
rediscovery.
please
I
wait.
closed my eyes,
Confused,
the
I
hand at
frowned
my
and was about
side
to ask
clenching
why,
into a
when a
fist.
voice
The
came from
moment I
behind
took
me.
this case,
Ethan,
I knew a
don't go.
confrontation with
The
Chloe
familiar
was
voice made me
inevitable.
freeze.
An
I
awkward
turned around
silence
slowly.
descended, wrapping
Chloe was
around
standing
us like a
behind me,
thick cocoon.
her eyes following
Crawford
my
Corp
every move.
employees
A
hurried
mixture of
past,
caution
but
and the
many of
sheer
them
joy of
paused to stare
rediscovery.
when they saw
I
their
closed my
CEO.
eyes,
After
the hand
all,
at my side
their
clenching
boss was
into a
famously
fist.
immune to
The
the
moment I
charms
took
of
this
men,
case,
and they were
I
all
knew a
curious to
confrontation
see
with
who
Chloe
this
was
man was that
inevitable.
had
An
captured her
awkward
attention.
silence
I felt their
descended,
curious,
wrapping around us like
gossiping
a thick
eyes on me,
cocoon.
and I
Croft
felt
Corp
like I was on
employees hurried
pins and
past,
needles.
but many of
It's
them
the
paused to
middle of the
stare when they saw their
workday, I
CEO.
said,
After
sighing
all,
in
their
frustration.
boss was
Let's go
famously immune
talk
to the
somewhere
charms of
else.
men, and they
Chloe's
were
eyes
all
lit up,
curious to see
and
who
she
this
nodded eagerly.
man was that
As long
had
as I was
captured her
willing to
attention.
talk to
I
her,
felt their
there was still
curious,
a chance.
gossiping eyes
She didn't
on
even
me,
realize
and
that
I
it was
felt like I
only
was
with
on
me
pins and
that she
needles.
ever let
It's
her
the middle of
childish
the
side
workday,
show. When
I
we got to
said,
the parking
sighing in
garage, I
frustration.
kept trying to
Let's go
create
talk
distance
somewhere else.
between us,
Chloe's
unsettled
eyes
by
lit
the
up,
intensity
and
of
she
her
nodded
stare.
eagerly.
But before I could
As long as I
react,
was willing to
she had
talk
me
to her,
pinned against the
there was
wall,
still a
her
chance.
arms
She
wrapped
didn't even
tightly around my
realize that it was
waist.
only with me,
She
and that
inhaled
she ever let her
deeply,
childish
greedily
side show.
taking in my
When we got
familiar
to the
scent,
parking
the
garage,
faint hint of
I kept trying to
jasmine that
create
had
distance
always
between
soothed
us,
her. She
unsettled
stared
by
at
the
me, her
intensity of
cool
her
hand
stare.
forcing its
But
way
before I could
between my
react,
fingers,
she had me pinned
lacing them
against the wall.
together. She
Her
couldn't
arms
hold
wrapped
back any
tightly around my
longer.
waist.
She wanted
She
to hold
inhaled
me, to hug
deeply,
me, to kiss
greedily
me.
taking in
I
my familiar
struggled but
scent,
couldn't break
the faint
free.
hint of jasmine
Annoyed,
that had
I
always
gave
soothed
her a
her.
hard shove.
She
My
stared at me,
voice was
her
sharp.
cool hand
Let
forcing
go
its
of
way
me.
between my
I said we
fingers,
should go to a
lacing them
coffee
together.
shop. If
She
you want to
couldn't
do
hold
this
back any
here,
longer.
I'm
She
leaving.
wanted to
She
hold
rested
me,
her head on
to
my
hug
shoulder,
me,
her
to
voice
kiss
tight
me.
with
I
emotion.
struggled but
Ethan,
couldn't break
I've
free.
missed you so much.
Annoyed, I
Please
gave
don't
her a
push me
hard
away.
shove.
I'm
My voice
begging loving
was
you.
sharp.
Every
Let go of
second
me.
of the past
I
3
said,
years had
"We
been
should
an
go to a
eternity
coffee
for
shop.
her. We were
If you
so
want to do
close
this
I could hear her
I'm
heart
leaving."
hammering
She
against her
rested her
ribs.
head on my
My
shoulder,
voice was
her
flat,
voice tight with
devoid of
emotion.
emotion.
"Ethan,
But I haven't
I've
missed you at
so
all.
much.
Chloe,
Please
you're
don't
not
push
that
me
important
away.
to me.
I'm
There's
begging
no
you."
need for this
Every
to be
second of
so
the past 3
unpleasant.
years
It's all
had
in the
been an
past.
eternity for
Her
her.
breathing grew
We were so
ragged.
close.
She
I
buried
could
her
hear her
face in
heart
my
hammering
shoulder
against
and
her
shook her
ribs.
head,
My
her
voice was
voice
flat,
wounded.
devoid of
Ethan,
emotion.
you never
"But
used to
I
treat me
haven't
like
missed you at
this."
all.
Perhaps
Chloe,
knowing she was in
you're
the
not
wrong,
that
she
important to
changed
me.
the subject.
There's no need
Her
for this
grip
to be
still
so
tight.
unpleasant.
When you
It's
left
all
3
in the
years
past."
ago,
Her
was it
breathing
because
grew
I broke
ragged.
your heart?
She
She
buried her
didn't seem
face
to
in my
need an
shoulder and
answer,
shook her head.
just
Her
continued
voice
speaking.
wounded.
But I had my
"Ethan,
reasons.
you never used to
I
treat
had
me
the
like
entire
this."
Crawford
Perhaps knowing
legacy
she
on
was in
my
the wrong,
shoulders.
she
I could
changed the
never
subject.
forget how
Her
people
grip
sneered
still
at me
tight.
after my
"When you
parents
left
died. She suddenly laughed, a
3
wild,
years ago,
hateful sound.
was it
I
because I
stared
broke
at
your
her,
heart?" She
alarmed
didn't
and
seem to need an
confused.
answer.
"Ethan,
Just
all those
continued
people who
speaking.
hurt us,"
"But I had my
she said,
reasons.
her
I
eyes
had the
glinting
entire
with a
Croft
strange
legacy on
light.
my shoulders.
"They're all gone
I could
now.
never forget
They'll
how
never hurt
people
us again."
sneered at
I
me
had
after my
Julian
parents died.
committed to a
She suddenly
psychiatric
left.
hospital. Electroshock therapy,
sound.
chemical
I stared at
restraints,
her,
solitary
alarmed and
confinement.
confused.
Everything he did to you, I
all
did
those
to
people
him.
who hurt
I bit
us,
down hard
she
on my
said,
lip.
her
She
eyes
smiled a
glinting with a
dazed,
strange light.
almost
They're all
delirious
gone
smile.
now.
Ethan,
They'll never hurt
what
us
if I
again.
give you
I had
everything?
Julian
All
committed
of
to a
Crawford Corp,
psychiatric
it's all
hospital.
yours.
Electroshock
Without you,
therapy,
what's the point of
chemical
any of it?
restraints,
My voice was
solitary
cold.
confinement.
The only thing I
Everything he
want
did
from
to
you is for
I
you
did
to
to
stay
him.
away from
I
me.
bit down
I
hard
was
on my
terrified that
lip. She
one wrong
smiled,
move
dazed,
would land me
almost
in the same
delirious
position
smile.
as Julian.
Ethan,
Her
what
mood
if I give you
shifted in an
everything?
instant.
All of
But I
Crawford
can't,
Corp.
she
It's all
cried.
yours.
Suddenly,
Without you,
her arms
what's
were
the point
around
of
my
any of
neck,
it?
and she
My
was
voice
kissing
was
me.
cold.
It was
The
a
only
deep,
thing I want from you was for
bruising,
you to stay away
desperate
from me.
kiss.
I
As
was
if she were trying to
terrified that
pour
one
3
wrong
years
move
of
would
longing into
land
that
me in the
single
same
moment.
position as
I
Julian.
struggled,
Her
then
mood
bit down
shifted in an
hard on her
instant.
lip. The
But I
metallic
can't.
taste of
She
blood
cried.
filled my mouth.
Suddenly,
She must
her
have
arms
sensed
were
my
around my neck,
desperation, because
she
she
was
pulled
kissing me.
back,
It
her
was a
hands
deep,
trembling.
bruising,
I'm sorry,
desperate
Ethan.
kiss,
I just
as if
can't
she
bear
were
to
trying
be
to pour
without
3
you any
years
longer.
of longing
I
into
really
that
do
single
love you,
moment.
Ethan.
I
I said
struggled,
coolly,
then bit down
Chloe,
hard on her
stop
lip.
with the act.
The
In
metallic
the 8
taste of
years we
blood
spent
filled my
together,
mouth.
you never
She
once
must
told
have
me you
sensed my
loved me.
desperation,
This isn't
because she
love.
pulled
It's
back,
just
her
you,
hands
unable
trembling.
to accept
I'm
that I'm
sorry,
gone.
Ethan.
Her
I
eyes
just
were
can't bear to be
bloodshot,
without you any
filled with a
longer.
bottomless
And I really
grief.
do love you,
No,
Ethan.
when I was
I
with
said
you,
coolly.
I was only
Chloe,
ever
stop
happy.
with the
There
act.
was no
In the 8 years
resentment.
we spent
As if to
together,
prove her
you
point,
never once
she
told me you
began
loved
to
me.
unbutton her blouse
This
with trembling
isn't love.
fingers.
It's
I
just you,
stared, and
unable
for
to
the first
accept that I'm
time,
gone.
I
Her
noticed that
eyes
her
were
pale
bloodshot,
hands were covered in
filled with a
small,
bottomless
faint
grief.
scars,
No,
like
when I was
old
with you,
burns.
I was
After you
only ever
left,
happy.
there was no
There
one
was
to
no
iron my
resentment.
shirts for me,
As if to
she
prove her
said with a
point,
bitter smile.
she began to
I'm
unbutton her
clumsy.
blouse with
I always
trembling
burn
fingers.
myself.
I
As she
stared,
spoke, she
and for the
pulled
first
aside
time,
the
I
fabric of her
noticed that her
blouse.
pale hands
My
were covered in
pupils
small,
dilated. There,
faint scars,
tattooed directly
like old
over her
burns.
heart, was my
After you
name.
left,
I looked
there
up
was
at
no one
her,
to iron my shirts
speechless.
for me.
Seeing the
She said
emotion
with a
in my
bitter
eyes
smile,
fade
I'm
back into
clumsy.
cold
I
indifference,
always burn
Chloe's
myself.
heart began to
As she
sink.
spoke,
Her
she
voice
pulled aside
trembled.
the
The
fabric of
word
her
Julian's
blouse.
friends
My
carved
pupils
into your
dilated.
back.
There,
I've never forgotten
tattooed
it
directly
for a
over her
single
heart,
moment.
was my
Ethan,
name.
this is
I
my
looked up at
penance.
her,
It was a
speechless,
gesture of
seeing
profound
the emotion
love.
in my
Looking
eyes
into
fade
her
back into
sincere
cold
eyes,
indifference.
I was
Chloe's heart
transported
began
back
to
in
sink.
time to the
Her
girl
voice
who had
trembled.
promised me,
The word
Ethan,
Julian's
I will
friends
make
carved
sure
into your
you have a
back.
good life.
I've never
But
forgotten
promises
it
are
for a
cheap,
single moment.
and fate can be
Ethan,
cruel.
this
My love for
is my
her had died a
penance.
slow
It was a
death,
gesture
with
of
every
profound
time she
love.
chose Julian
Looking into
over
her
me,
sincere
with every
eyes,
time she
I was
forced me to back
transported back in
down,
time
with
to the
every
girl
time
who
she
had
refused to
promised me.
acknowledge who I was
Ethan,
to her.
I will make
My
sure you
voice
have a
was
good
hoarse.
life.
Chloe,
Promises are
I
cheap,
haven't forgotten
and fate
either.
can be
At
cruel.
my words,
My
her
love for her
eyes
had
lit up.
died a slow
Ethan, I knew you
death.
couldn't let me
With every
go.
time she chose
I looked at
Julian
her
over
and
me.
continued.
With every
I
time
haven't
she
forgotten
forced
how
me to
you
back
forced me
down.
to sign that
With every
release,
time she refused to
defending them
acknowledge
while
who I
you
was to her.
humiliated me with your
My voice
money,
was hoarse.
over and over
Chloe,
again. With
I haven't
every word
forgotten
I
either.
spoke,
At
the
my
color
words,
drained
her eyes
further
lit
from
up.
her face.
Ethan,
Her
I
voice
knew
was a
you couldn't
hoarse
let me go.
whisper,
I looked at
trembling
her and
almost
continued.
imperceptibly.
I haven't forgotten how
No,
you
that's
forced me to
not it.
sign that
I just
release,
wanted to
defending
protect
them
you.
while you
I laughed
humiliated me with
coldly.
your money.
Protect
Over
me?
and over
Then
again.
why is it
With
that
every
every
word I
time
spoke,
Julian
the
hurt me,
color drained
you never
further
once
from her
chose my
face.
side?
Her voice
Chloe
was a hoarse
froze,
whisper,
her mouth
trembling
opening and
almost
closing, but
imperceptibly.
no sound
No,
coming out.
that's
I
not
went
it.
on. You don't even realize it, do you?
I just
Because
wanted to
deep
protect
down,
you.
you're more
I laughed
class-conscious
coldly.
than anyone.
Protect me.
The fact
Then
that a
why is it
fishmonger
that
paid for
every
your
time Julian hurt
education
me,
must be your
you
most
never once
shameful
chose my
memory?
side?
I wasn't
Chloe
good enough
froze,
for you,
her
which is
mouth
why
opening
you
and
never
closing,
told me you
but
loved
no
me.
sound coming
I
out.
wasn't good
I
enough
went
for
on.
you, which
don't
is
even
why
realize
I was
it,
always
do
the
you?
one you were
Because
willing to
deep down,
sacrifice.
you're more
I almost
class-conscious
laughed,
than anyone.
but as the
The
laugh
fact that a
escaped my
fishmonger paid
lips,
for your
it turned into a
education must
sob,
be your most
and
shameful
tears began
memory.
to stream
I
down
wasn't good
my
enough for
face.
you,
14
which is why you
years.
never told
We
me
had
you
known
loved
each
me.
other for
I
14
wasn't good enough
years,
for you,
and yet it
which is
felt
why I
like
was
I was
always the
seeing the
one
real
you
Chloe
were
for the
willing to
very first time.
sacrifice.
In high
I almost
school,
laughed,
she had
but
appeared like
laugh
an
escaped my
angel,
lips.
defending
It
my
turned
fragile
into a
teenage
sob,
pride.
and
My
tears
teenage
began to
years had
stream
been
down
so
my
hard,
face.
and for that
14
small bit
years.
of warmth
We
she
had known
showed
each
me,
other for
I had
14
been willing
years.
to give up
And
everything,
yet it felt
even
like
my
I
own
was seeing
future, just
real
to make
Chloe
her
for the
life
very
easier.
first time.
I cherished
In
her,
high school,
and so I
she had appeared
tolerated
like an angel,
everything. And for
defending my
what?
fragile
You and
teenage
Julian
pride.
really are
My
a perfect
teenage years had
match.
been so
You're
hard,
both
and for that
selfish,
small bit of
manipulative
warmth she
monsters.
showed me,
One of
I
you
had
is
been willing to
arrogant
give up
and
everything,
status-obsessed.
even my
The
own
other is
future,
cruel
just
and
to
a
make her life
pathological
easier.
liar.
I
I took a
cherished
deep
her,
breath,
and
trying
so I
to steady my
tolerated
voice.
everything.
Chloe,
And for what?
I have never been
You and
ashamed of my
Julian really are a
background.
perfect
Every penny
match.
I've ever
You're both
earned,
selfish,
I've earned honestly.
manipulative
I
monsters.
can live a good
One of
life
you is
without
arrogant
you.
and
And
status
so,
obsessed.
I don't
The
need
other
your
is
love.
cruel and a
There was a
pathological
moment of
liar.
silence.
I took a deep
Chloe
breath,
looked up at
trying
me,
to steady my
her
voice.
eyes filled with
Chloe,
despair.
I have never been
Ethan,
ashamed
won't
of
you
my
give me
background.
even one more
Every penny
chance?
I've ever
I
earned.
answered
I've
coldly,
earned honestly.
there's no
I
chance
can
for
live a
us
good life
anymore.
without you.
Since you
And
were
so,
so eager
I
to
don't need your
erase your
love.
past,
There was a
you can
moment of
leave me there
silence.
with it.
Chloe
Seeing
looked
that
up
she
at
was
me,
still
her
following me
eyes
from a
filled with
distance,
despair.
I turned back
Ethan,
and said to the
won't you
broken
give me
woman
even
before
one more
me,
chance?
"Stop
I
following
answered
me,
coldly.
Chloe.
There's
The
no
sight
chance
of
for
you
us
makes me
anymore.
sick."
Since you
As
were
my
so
words
eager
hit
to
her,
erase your
she
past,
stumbled,
you can leave me
catching
there with it.
herself against the
Seeing that she
wall
was
before
still
sinking
following
to
me
her
from a
knees with a
distance, I
gut-wrenching
turned back
cry.
and said to
I
the
felt
broken woman
nothing.
before me,
I just walked
"Stop
away
following me.
faster. The
Chloe,
next morning,
the sight
I
of you
closed
makes me
my
sick."
eyes and tried
As
to
my
rest in
words
the
hit
back of a
her,
cab
she
on the way to
stumbled,
the airport.
catching
But
herself
just
against the
after I
wall
had
before
checked
her.
my bags,
Sinking to her
an
knees with a
announcement came over
gut-wrenching
the
cry,
airport's PA
I felt
system.
nothing.
Ladies
I
and
just
gentlemen, due
walked
to
away
an
faster.
unforeseen security
The next morning,
situation,
I
the
closed my
airport
eyes
is
and
now
tried to
on
rest in
lockdown. We
back of a cab on the
apologize
way
for
to
the
the airport.
inconvenience.
But just
The
after I checked
terminal
my
immediately
bags, an
filled with the
announcement came
sound of
over the
angry
airport's POS
complaints.
system.
I stood
"Ladies
near
and
the
gentlemen,
security line,
due to an
looking around in
unforeseen security
confusion when my
situation,
eyes met
the airport
Chloe's
is now on
sad,
lockdown.
haunted
We
gaze.
apologize
My
for the
knuckles turned white
inconvenience."
as I
The
gripped
terminal
my boarding
immediately
pass.
filled with
I knew
the
with a
sound of
sinking
angry
certainty
complaints.
that
I
she was
stood near the
behind
security
this.
line,
She moved
looking around in
closer, her
confusion when
eyes
my eyes met
dark.
Chloe's
"Ethan,
sad,
it's all right.
haunted gaze.
Since you won't
My
give me a
knuckles turned
chance,
white as I gripped
I'll
my
just
boarding
have to make my
pass.
own."
I knew with a
Terrible
sinking
feeling
certainty
washed
that she
over
was
me.
behind this.
"What are you
She
doing?"
moved closer,
Before the words
her
were
eyes
even
dark.
out of my mouth,
"Ethan,
she
it's
took
all
off her
right.
trench
Since
coat,
you won't give me a
revealing a
chance,
device
I'll just have
strapped
to
to
make
her
my own."
waist. "A
Terrible
bomb.
feeling
Come
washed
with me
over
and
me.
we both
"What are you
live,"
doing?"
she said,
Before the words
her
were
voice
even out of my
terrifyingly
mouth,
calm.
she took off her
"Stay,
trench coat,
and we all
revealing a
die."
device
I
strapped
stared
to
at
her
her in
waist.
horror.
"A bomb.
"Chloe,
Come with
this
me
is
and
an
we both
airport,
live,"
not
she
your
said,
personal
her
playground.
voice
She
terrifyingly
laughed.
calm.
"I knew you were
"Stay
too
and we all
kind,
die."
Ethan.
I
I could
stared
never
at her in
put you
horror.
in such a
"Chloe,
difficult position."
this
She
is an
pressed a
airport,
remote
not your
control into
personal
my hand.
playground.
"This
She
remote
laughed.
has 3
"I knew
buttons,
you were too kind,
red,
Ethan.
yellow,
I could
and
never
blue.
put you in such
Only
a
one of
difficult
them will
position."
disable the
She pressed
bomb.
a remote
Everyone's
control into my
life here,
hand. "This
including
remote has
mine,
3
is
buttons,
in your
red,
hands."
yellow, and
Her
blue.
intention was
Only
clear.
one of them will
She was
disable the
holding
bomb.
everyone in the
Everyone's
airport
life here,
hostage to make me
including
stay.
mine,
She didn't
is in
even
your
care
hands.
about her own
Her
life.
intention was
My
clear.
pupils
She was holding
constricted.
everyone in.
"You're despicable.
Airport
I
hostage
won't
to
do
make me
it."
stay.
I raised my
She didn't
hand
even
to
care
throw
about
the
her
remote
own
away,
life.
but
My
she
pupils
just smiled.
constricted.
"If you
"You're
do that,
despicable.
it will
I won't do
detonate
it." I
immediately."
raised my
I
hand to throw
stared
the
at
remote
her,
away,
my
but
shoulders
she just
shaking,
smiled.
and said
"If
through
you do
clenched
that,
teeth,
it will detonate
"Chloe,
immediately."
let everyone
I
else
stared at
leave.
her,
Just
my
you and
shoulders
me."
shaking,
Something
and
in
said
my
through clenched
words must
teeth,
have pleased her,
"Chloe,
because she
let
gave a
everyone else
small
leave.
smile and
Just you
nodded to
and
her
me."
assistant.
Something in my words
Passengers
must
and
have
staff
pleased her,
scrambled out of the
because she gave a
terminal,
small
and a
smile
dead
and nodded to
silence
her
fell over
assistant.
the vast,
Passengers and
empty
staff
space.
scrambled out of
I
the terminal,
stared at her,
and a
my
dead
resolve
silence fell over
hardening.
the
I
vast.
took a deep breath
I
and
stared
pressed
at
the
her,
red button.
my
The
resolve
countdown
hardening.
on the
I took
device
a
sped
deep
up.
breath and pressed the
Chloe
red button.
smiled, a
The countdown
fond,
on the device sped
indulgent
up.
look on her
Chloe
face.
smiled,
It
a
reminded her of the
fond,
bright red of the
indulgent
wedding
look on her
dress she'd
face.
worn
It
when we
reminded
went to
her
a
of the
haunted
bright red of
house
the
one
wedding
year.
dress
I had
she'd
lifted her
worn when
veil
we went to a
myself,
haunted house
and I
one
had
year.
thought she
I
was
had
the most
lifted her
beautiful
veil
thing I
myself,
had ever seen.
and I had
I
thought she was
pressed
the
the yellow
most
button. The
beautiful
timer
thing I
cut
had
in
ever
half.
seen.
Chloe's
I
mind
pressed the yellow
drifted to the
button.
two of
The
us
timer
walking
cut
hand
in
in
half.
hand through a
Chloe's mind
field of
drifted to the
golden
two of us
tulips.
walking,
My fingers
hand in hand
trembled,
through a
but
field
my
of golden
voice was
tulips.
terrifyingly
My fingers
calm.
trembled,
"Let me
but
go."
my
I
voice was
pressed the blue
terrifyingly
button.
calm.
The
"Let
timer
me
hit
go."
0.
I pressed
A
the blue
single
button.
tear
The
slid from
timer
the
hit
corner
0.
of Chloe's
A
eye.
single tear
She
slid from the
remembered the
corner
misty
of
blue
Chloe's
night
eye.
we first
She
moved
remembered
into
the
that
misty blue
tiny
night
apartment, when I had
first
carried
moved
her on my
into
back
that
and
tiny
run to the
apartment.
hospital.
When I
I
had
had
carried
pulled
her
her
on my
back
back
from the
and run
brink,
to the
and she
hospital.
had pushed
I
me
had pulled
into
her
the
back from the
abyss.
brink.
The explosion
And
I was
she had pushed
expecting
me
never
into the
came.
abyss.
Chloe
The
managed
explosion
a
I was
painful
expecting never
smile.
came.
"You
Chloe
win.
managed
I'll
a
let you
painful
go."
smile.
I clenched my
"You win.
fists,
I'll let you
furious
go."
at having
I
been
clenched my
manipulated.
fists,
I turned
furious
and
at having
walked
been
away,
manipulated.
but 100
I
feet
turned and
away,
walked away,
I heard a
but
deafening
100 feet
blast.
away,
Chloe
I heard
lay
a
in a
deafening
pool of her
blast.
own blood,
Chloe lay in
the
a
real
pool of her own
detonator
blood.
still clutched
The
in her
real
hand.
detonator
I
still
stared at
clutched clutched in
her,
her hand.
my eyes
I
filling
stared
with
at her.
tears.
My
She had
eyes
pressed
filling with
the button
tears.
herself.
She had pressed
She
the
had
button
never
herself.
planned on
She had never
surviving.
planned
The
on
moment I
surviving.
pressed any of
The
those
moment I pressed
buttons,
any of
she
those
had already
buttons,
lost
she had
everything.
already
If
lost
I had still
everything.
loved her,
If I had
I
still
would
loved
never
her,
have risked her
I would
life
never
like
have
that.
risked her
1
life like
month
that.
later,
1
Wall
month
Street.
later,
The news
Wall
that
Street.
Chloe was in a
The news
coma,
that Chloe
with
was in a
severe
coma
brain
with
damage,
severe
had
brain
shocked the
damage had
world.
shocked the world.
When I heard the
When I heard
news,
the
my
news,
hands,
my
which were
hands,
sorting through a
which were
case
sorting
file,
through a case
paused
file,
for a moment,
paused for a
and then
moment,
continued
and
as
then
if nothing
continued
had
as if
happened.
nothing had
One
happened.
night, a very
One night,
large,
a very
anonymous
large,
deposit appeared in
anonymous
my bank
deposit appeared
account.
in my
The
bank
bank had
account.
no
The
information,
bank had
only
no
that the
information.
transfer had been
Only that the
initiated by
transfer
a
had
Ms.
been
C.
initiated
I
by a
used
Ms.
the
C.
money to
I
start a
used the money
charitable
to start a
foundation
charitable
to help
foundation to help
underprivileged students
underprivileged
afford a
students
college
afford a college
education. I
education.
bought a bouquet
I
of
bought a bouquet
flowers
of
and had
flowers
them
on
sent to
hand,
Chloe's
them sent
hospital
to
room.
Chloe's
The
hospital
cost
room.
was exactly
The cost was exactly
$500, the same
$500,
amount she had
the
paid
same
for my
amount she had
class
paid
fees
for
all
my
those years ago.
class fees
The
all those years
evening
ago.
wind dried
The
the
evening
unshed
wind dried
tears
the
in my
unshed
eyes.
tears in my
Perhaps a
eyes.
life is
Perhaps
like
a
the
life is like the
seasons.
seasons.
Chloe was
Chloe
lost
was
in an
lost in an
endless,
endless,
snowy
snowy
winter,
winter.
so I would
So
have
I
to
would
be the
have to be the
spring
spring and
and
welcome a new
welcome a new
beginning.
beginning.